when the A&Rs and the management are listening to like, can I hear your demos? They genuinely are expecting like releasable quality level.
That you can hear everything accurately is just the key to a good mix.
I've been into rooms where the listening position, like where the engineer's sitting, is obviously the best spot, but then on the sofa is the worst spot.
The reality is I need it to sound as good as physically possible when I'm producing and making the track with the artist.
So who do you think this product is going to be most helpful?
Everyone.
In this video, we're talking to music production pros about the challenges of mixing in untreated rooms, like the one you may be sitting in right now. We'll hear their mixed translation horror stories and how you can avoid them. We're going to debate the merits of room correction systems, and we'll be looking at the new ORIA Mini from Audient. Hi, I'm Will Betts, and this roundtable discussion is presented by Audient in association with ControlRoom. And our expert guests are Romesh Dodangoda, one of the UK's busiest rock producers and mixers, with credits including Motorhead, Bring Me the Horizon, and Nova Twins. Pierpaolo Demarchi, lead engineer at Cube Studios, who's made a name mixing Atmos releases for David Guetta, Stormzy, and Nile Rodgers. And finally, Charlieeeee Deakin-Davies, a producer, songwriter, mixer, and artist who's worked with Gary Barlow, Ray, and Laura Marling, and who makes high-energy indie D&B as Charlie, that's with 5 E's. Welcome, and thank you all for being here. So let's kick it off then. We want to know, essentially, the basics. So why is accurate monitoring so important? Charlie, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I haven't done an accurate mix and then I listen to it in my car and all I can hear is the compression of the bass squeezing the entire track, I think I realise, yeah, I probably should have spent more time making sure that demo mix sounded right.
Right, yeah. So it's a sort of, you can make some pretty big mix errors, is what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Pierre?
Yeah, so think about, I don't know, like every people is going to listen to music. They're not going to be listening into your room. So everyone has a complete different room. So the best you can do is, try to get as flat as possible. And that's the best way to be able to have your mix translating in a different ways, in different rooms, different places.
Nice. Romesh, anything to add to that?
I think you got sums up pretty. Like, I think having a room that you can hear everything accurately is just the key to a good mix. It's like, I speak to so many people who like struggle with, why can't I get this bottom end right, and why can't I get this to sit? And if you can't hear those frequencies, then you're just gonna go around in a circle.
So it's about trusting the room so that you can trust your mix. Would you say that's a fair?
Yeah, I think it's almost just taking the room out of the equation, as much as you can, really. And I think it's kind of like, if you like, when you put on a pair of headphones, you are eliminating the room, but headphone mixing is not always, what you want to do. So by having, a room correction, by having room correction, you're kind of getting as close to that, the sound coming out of the actual speakers. And I mean, Charlie, what about for the different genres that you work in? Because you've done folk in the past, now you're doing more electronic. How does that work for? Yeah,
I mean, I think that they completely resonate in different ways. So when I'm doing like folk music, I'm not really worried about the sub frequencies. I'm like, there kind of shouldn't be any, or like, depending on what kind of thing you're going for, it's more about the delicate energy of the mix, and are you able to create space for all of the parts? Where when you're doing like drum and bass or like speed garage, it's like, is the bass and is the kick like fitting within each other? And that's when you really need to make sure that like you're cranking it, you're turning it up, you're being able to hear it in lots of different environments and different speakers and stuff. So yeah, I think that there's like a huge difference throughout my career of what I care about in a room and in a speaker setup versus the genre I'm working on.
Interesting. I mean,
yeah, I totally agree. I mean, low end is probably the most important factor that gets completely broke down in a bad room, So totally important. And like Romesh already mentioned, like you can mix on headphones and remove the room out of the equation, but at the same time, not many people can, stay long hours on headphones because it can be quite tiring. And some people are amazing mixing on headphones, but it's it's a separate way of it's a complete different way, complete different feeling that you get from mixing on speakers. So
the room has enormous impact right?
Yeah.
No matter what. But how do you sort of mitigate for that? I mean, maybe we'll get to that. What's the worst space you've ever worked in? Come on, worst space ever that you've worked in.
I had to do a track for this pop artist, and it was like a last minute, can you get on a plane to, I think it was Belgium? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so like I just packed a small rig, and we basically turned a hotel room into a studio, like duvets up against the wall, and yeah, like I had to mix the song because it had to go on air in the States, and you know, not ideal because you know I had no idea what that room sounded like, but you know we got through it. But it was, you know, there's a lot of kind of like referencing on different things to make sure it was, you know, sounding good. But yeah, I kind of wish I didn't have to do it like that.
I mean, so what about you, Charlie? What's the worst space you've had to mix in?
You know, what's the definition of worst, you know? One of the most challenging spaces, I guess, was during lockdown. I got locked down at a friend's house, and I was still working for Gary at the time. And so
Gary Barlow.
Yeah, Gary Barlow, sorry. And yeah, I basically had to turn a pantry into like a recording studio. And it was really funny because the family was still using the pantry as a pantry. And I'd have to basically be like, don't come in during these hours, like kind of thing. But I don't know, there was something kind of special about it in the sense of like, when you care about music so much and you have such an important deadline to get done, that like any space can be the space that you work in. And I think there's something quite magical about that. But yeah, that did not yield the best mixes of my life.
Right. Yeah. Any, I mean, I know you work at home a decent amount as well. Like.
Yeah, I do most of the stuff at home, and it's the worst place you can think about. It's basically, you know, one of those British rooftops where you've got not this, but this. So one side is there's an angle, one side there isn't. And on top of that, I'm in the worst place, which is the corner. So think about that, being in a corner. I think that's the worst I've been. But I still, you know, keep doing that because I've learned how, you know, how kind of translates everywhere else, because I'm a freelancer, so I work in different studios every time, so I kind of bring my mixes everywhere, trying to listen and see if there's any issues. And at the beginning there were a lot of issues, trust me, quite a lot, but then over the years, you know, you kind of learn and practice, and yeah, with the help from software, and you know, recently got a sub just to make things worse in the room. And yeah, things are going great. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to get into some of what you can do to improve these situations in a little bit, but let's talk, while we're on horror stories, let's talk about maybe the worst mixed translation event you've encountered. So let's say, what's the worst surprise, Romesh, that you've had when hearing your mix in a different environment?
I think it was, I mean, probably going back to when I was starting out, and you know, I think back then it was just always the bottom end. You just couldn't. And again, this is just going back to because I couldn't hear it. Yeah. And so yeah, and then you know, the surprise of just trying to play it in some other environment and being like, oh, that's what it sounds like. And then it's just confusing then because you're like, well, which one's right? And you know.
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah, I think when I was starting out, definitely like had loads of kind of going back and forth, trying to, you know, make it just work in general in most places, you know.
And so when you say you couldn't hear it, it's because your speakers didn't go down to the lower frequencies, or that you had a room that didn't?
It's just the room pretty much. It's
right,
like, if,
okay.
you know, I think what you may not really understand when you're starting out is like how big an impact that room has on what you're listening to. So for instance, if you're in a very bassy sounding room, your mixes are going to be bass light because you're just responding to, you know, what you're hearing. So, you know, I think that's a huge problem when most people are starting out, when they don't understand that interaction between the room and the speakers.
Totally. And Charlie, I mean, you must have a horror story of things gone wrong in mixed translation.
Yeah, definitely. Well, me doing the drum and bass side of things is a kind of a newer world, but yeah, I had such a horror story relatively recently when I was doing this producer basically show off day where you get to show like what you've been working on, and I had been working on this demo and I was really proud of this song, and it was the most bass heavy thing I'd ever produced in my life, and I was like, oh my god, walk into the room, the speakers are like these massive like speaker, I'm like, oh my god, this is great, this song, this is gonna like rattle this room. I had done like a lot of hard left and right panning on the song. Didn't really think much of it, but I had not been summing to mono during the process of mixing this demo. And get into like playing the song, and it gets to the first chorus, and it just sounds so bad. There is no articulation, there is like nothing, it's just bass, and I'm like, oh my god, what have I done? But then I was like listening to it more and more, and I was like, something's like really off with this. And basically I was like, my mix doesn't normally sound this bad, I swear. And they're like, sure. And I'm like, no, I think there's something wrong with the speakers. And they're like, yeah, have you ever considered it might be your mix? And I was like, I swear to god, it is not my mix, it's the speakers. And basically I ended up like getting them to like look around the back, and what they'd accidentally done is they'd made it so that it was just the left channel was doubled, so it was essentially in mono, but only the left feed was then like playing out through the speakers, so I wasn't actually getting like an accurate read on my mix. And I was like, thank god I'm like not like I know what I'm talking about when I'm saying like the mix does not sound like that. And then everyone was like, okay, but the problem was that was my like debut with this group of people over my mix, and no one else's mixes sounded bad even though it was left some to mono. And I was like, I've got to make sure I mix my demos and my tracks in mono more, because then I wouldn't have had that problem.
It's a great point though. Like checking mixes in mono. I mean, everybody talks about it still, but maybe with people using headphones more and more for listening back, it's maybe not something that people think about.
Yeah.
I never used to I stopped caring about it for a long time, and I was like, but now like seeing the amount of like Bluetooth speakers that people listen to, a lot of them sum to mono. So like I'm back checking again.
Yeah.
What about you, Pierre? What's your horror story?
My horror story, well, fun enough, it's like most everyone else, is low end. So because the low end is always like a bigger shoes, and it's the first thing that you hear in a different system than yours. I used to mix a uni, and this room, it was basically, I had a wall right behind me, so the speaker didn't have even room to develop. There was some room modes and stuff where there was some cancellation in the low end. So I took the mix, and then I put back in my friend's car, and all I could hear was low end, and the vocals, I couldn't hear the vocals. Think about how bad the low end was, where it will kind of go over the vocals, and we'll kind of make that, like, what's going on? What's going on, mate? It's your speakers. No, it's not the speakers, because then we'll turn on the radio, and the songs were fine. So, oh, it's definitely my mix. Okay. So, yeah, that was definitely my first approach to, okay, we need to sort something now.
Well,
too much, yeah.
It's a very common experience. It's the reason the car test exists, right?
Yeah. It's the best thing so far.
It's also brutal.
Yeah,
brutal and revealing.
Brutal.
Charlie, are there systems that you think could have helped you with that, with your horror story? Like,
Yeah, I mean, often I wouldn't necessarily think to like make them check if their speakers are actually in stereo, but I do think overall it made me change the way that I was like looking at the bass in my mix anyway. And I used to mix a lot when I was doing the folk stuff, and then I haven't been mixing my projects so much. I've been using Alex Evans, and coincidentally Matt, the engineer on this, has been mixing a lot of my stuff. But I've started mixing again, and I'm really noticing that like my production studio is not suited for like the mix I need. So I'm finding that I'm like going into other studios, and I'm based at 1087. So I have access to like the bigger studio in the club and some of the B rooms and things like that. So
that's a complex. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that kind of neatly brings us on to the steps you take and the checks that you do along the way to try and make sure that mixes, you don't end up in these terrible situations where you're embarrassed by your mixing.
Yeah, you learn from your mistakes.
So, yeah, then tell us about your checks. What steps do you take to make sure you don't have these?
So definitely listening on different systems definitely helps. The fact that I work in different studios every day, helps me a lot. At least at the beginning, I will take my mix literally everywhere, listen to anything that could just reproduce sound, and use that not just to listen to my mix, but listen to a reference first, so I get an idea of what the system sounds like, and then go back to my mix. Yeah. And so that helps you like reset your ears, because you don't know the room. We might putting a pair of speakers here and play your mix. Sound horrible, but maybe it's the room, so you need to listen to a reference first in order to understand what's going on. Then listen to your mix. So I would use, like at home now, I've got like a pair of NS10s really help.
Yes.
Yeah.
NS10 Club.
Got them
For life,
everywhere.
you rock.
You know, switch, put them in mono, lower the volume, check the balance. Helps me a lot. Obviously, my phone. Not so much the AirPods, because I've learned a few things I don't like about AirPods. So now I'm listening just through
That's a controversial take. I'm sure that's going to be a controversial take.
I know,
but carry
and
on.
I started with that, but then it would just throw me off on certain things. You know, I guess we all wire differently. But then I would use the phone speakers, right, to listen to that, and that helps me a lot. And another trick, it just happened randomly. It was basically while the song was playing on my system, I was just making a video of the room, like some gear, and then hearing back the video through the phone speakers made me realize, oh my God, what's that?
Yeah.
That's like the balance between the vocals and the instruments was like much clearer than 10,000 pound setup. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's incredible. I think it's more than, the price difference is the fact that it's just an extra way of listening, an extra way of referencing your mixes. Yeah. So the more you add in place, the better is understanding you have of your mix, I guess.
Yeah, well, I know this is more about live sound, but so I do live sound MDing and like making tracks and everything like that. Something that is so wild is when you are doing a live show, you obviously need to make sure it sounds good for as many people in the audience as possible. But more people see it on social media afterwards. Especially I work with people who are really big on TikTok, who have millions of followers and stuff. And we ended up mixing the shows differently so that they sounded better through a phone when it was recorded afterwards.
Yeah.
So we were actually compromising the in the room space so that they sound better on better on social media. Yeah, and it's not the desk broadcast, it's the average person who is just filming the show. And the thing that's really sad is that the problem is the lead vocal was always too loud on an iPhone recording or like on a phone recording. And so we ended up having to turn the vocal down, and it swings and roundabouts. You have to really make the decision over what you're doing. And the same,
definitely,
when I post videos of me producing tracks, I either have to choose if I'm going to take the bounce of the project file and place it over the video I've just filmed, or take the video film, because it's so different. Yeah, the sound is so different.
Definitely, because they focus obviously on the mid-range, right? So a lot mid-range. And sometimes that helps rather than volume. Sometimes it's just EQing the mid-range out, just to keep the low end and having them present. But yeah, we can get deep into that. Let's not. Okay.
So what's your favorite frequency?
So, Romesh, how often are you switching then between these different systems? Because you must be checking as well, like these guys on.
I actually don't check in many places anymore. I spent a long time trying to just get my mix room to trust it, basically. So I think like recently, like I'm so happy with like how that mix room sounds now acoustically, and I just trust it now. And so, and I also, I think you can really go down a hole if you're checking things in so many places. Sometimes you just start questioning everything. The only things that I might check now are, I've got like some Sonos speakers that I will check the mix on, because I think today, like I didn't usually used to care about mono so much, but with all these Bluetooth speakers are out now, they kind of fall down to that. So I check there, and like you were saying, the phone, I might just check something, because also like people release stuff on social media, and like as soon as it hits a platform, there's this weird compression that's going on with stuff. I mean that doesn't make me change my mix, but I will just have a listen and just But I think for me the most important thing was getting my room right to the point that I could actually eliminate doing all those checks in other places. Okay, so is it sort of about improving the workflow and making it more time efficient? Yeah, it's just it's just taking too much time. If you're working on an album of like 12 songs, and like I've got to go to another record, I haven't got the time to go and listen and check that it's okay in a car or whatever. And also every car sounds different, so then which car is right? It's like, so for me it was just more important, build a room that I can trust and I know exactly what is coming out is, and just learning that room as well. I think that's a huge part of it. So it's sort of a set and forget thing for you then, is it? Yeah, I just don't think about it anymore. And have you arrived there through
room correction, speaker calibration?
Yeah, discovering room correction was the greatest day of my life. Because it just unlocks like a lot of things that I was struggling with, and it's basically that if you can't hear it, you're going to struggle to fix it, and that applies to like the bottom end. It applies to the mid range with the vocal. If your room is not telling you that that picture, then how do you can't fix it? You're just guessing. So yeah, for me it was just all about. Or not just the room correction, but the acoustics itself. I think room correction is great, but it has to work alongside acoustic treatment, because there's certain things that room correction will not fix.
No matter the system. Right?
Yeah. So like like the reverb times at certain frequencies, that can only really be fixed with acoustic treatment. So I think those two things together just completely life changing for me.
And so you've got it professionally acoustically treated now, but for people who are maybe a little bit earlier in their careers or don't have access to those sorts of facilities, like what are those easy acoustic changes you can make in your room where
I think no matter where you are, it's so easy to DIY yourself some panels to make sure those first reflection points are treated, and the ceiling was a huge thing for me, getting the absorption there, and like I think using maybe building your own panels if you're starting out, and then a combination of that and room correction, you're then giving yourself the best chance of actually hearing what's going on in your mix, and like actually figuring out it. That immediately will reveal the problems in a mix.
So your approach is trust the room, trust the system, get to know it, and then there's less downstream checking. But like for you two, it sounds like checking is very much a part of it. So is there like, would having different profiles available on the one system be a useful thing to you in your process, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, I was mixing a lot more when I was doing more acoustic-based stuff. So I had the same thing where it was like set and forget. It was just sort of like once I knew that space, I just knew it sounded right. But I do feel like now I'm jumping around so many genres. I would say this is the most amount of genres I've ever done in like 1 week. I could really benefit from having like a system that my speakers can jump around or like have more of a variety in the setup for what I'm hearing in the room. Like, yeah.
Or like being able to do the car test maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So I used to have, for example, an EQ preset on my master bus where it would emulate the NS10's curve. So I would just listen with that. There was a guy on YouTube just talking about it, and I started using it, and then I actually got a pair of NS10s. So I don't use that anymore, but it was still useful to listen through. It's like listening through a phone of, just having different ways of listening to your mix is definitely helpful, especially when in the beginning, as you get experience like Romesh has, you get to a point where you know your system well enough that you know how it's going to translate, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's definitely helpful.
Are you ever checking, I mean, Romesh, I know you use NS10s with a sub?
Gen X sub, yeah.
Are you ever checking without the sub? Do you ever sort of just bypass that, or is it always that one system?
Sub's always on for me. I think the sub was also like a huge part of, me being able to hear everything. Like I like kind of feeling the weight of the bottom end when I'm mixing. I find it's exciting, but it helps you fine tune that kick and bass relationship, and just hearing more of the picture really. But yeah, I kind of keep it on all the time. But then obviously introducing a sub then can cause problems with a room as well. So again, that's kind of room correction kind of saves you there as well.
Well, I think an interesting thing for me is obviously on a mix level, you want to be able to turn things on and off and stuff like that. But I really see it as like I'm definitely a producer mixer. So I'm spending a lot more time doing production sessions, and the reality is I need it to sound as good as physically possible when I'm producing and making the track with the artist, because they don't want an NS10 mix being like, what's going on? Like this doesn't sound very good. It's like, because I haven't mixed it yet. So I've got some really like nice round Genelecs, and I personally find they're so good for like when I'm producing, because they just defaultly just sound a bit warmer, a bit nicer to start with. But personally, I would really like to be able to have a version where I can hear a more clear, accurate mix from my speakers than the like comfortable bubble wrapped version of my mix.
You're totally right there, though. I think in the tracking stage, you really want something that feels exciting and not, not clinical.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, that sort of brings me on to the differences between, you touched on it there, Charlie, about the differences between producing and mixing, and what that means for the listening experience for the artist, for instance. Like, Romesh, what differences do you find you have to make in the space? You said you have to make it more exciting, but what does that mean exactly?
I think it's just, for me, like, I want to make sure that when the artist is sat in the room, that most points of the room, or, wherever they're sitting, sounds exciting, sounds good. Because when you're working on a track with an artist, you don't want to have to explain to them, oh, it's really bassy over there, and all that stuff. So I think just kind of having monitoring that feels good everywhere, because at the end of the day, when you're kind of producing the track, you don't want to get too bogged down with like mix level details and stuff. You're painting that broader picture of like getting it to feel good and all that stuff. I mean, at the same time, it is important, you are basing your recording decisions at that moment as well. So I'm not saying it's not important to be, you still want to have accurate speakers in that stage. I mean, especially for me, if I'm miking guitar amps, I really need to hear what I'm doing there, because I also sum multiple mics to one channel, because I don't like giving myself too many options later on. So in that sense, I need to know that blend is like bang on. So yeah, I think.
So just to move on to calibration, then the speaker calibration, room correction, more fully. So we've sort of established that the reality of most rooms is that they're imperfect, right? And you need assistance in various ways, whether that's acoustic treatment, or whether that's in speaker calibration, room correction, in software or hardware. So what's the biggest difference you've ever encountered in a room that's between it being not corrected and corrected? I mean, you've just, in the last year, you've built a new room at your studio Longwave, haven't you, Romesh? So what's the difference there between it being on and being off?
I think it's just the way that, I think everything really. I think the whole picture, what you're listening to just becomes so much more accurate, and I feel I can trust it, because I'm hearing everything like correct, basically. I think one of the main things it really did was help my low end be a lot more solid, because one of the big problems in most kind of smaller rooms is you're going to get this dip in the low mids, and that's usually a ceiling thing, I think. And
right.
I worked really hard with the acoustic treatment to kind of get rid of that, and also kind of moving the speakers towards the wall kind of changes where that null happens, and that's something that I spent a lot of time moving the desk until I could. But then the higher up you can take that, it becomes a bit easier to treat. And
higher up,
getting that null.
Oh, I see. So it's a higher frequency, so you can use acoustic treatment more effectively. Yeah.
So like playing around with that kind of was a huge thing. But now I feel like between that and the room correction, everything just feels like it's, like I can just trust that system now.
Amazing. Let's do a poll. Quick poll. Hot takes. What's more important in a mix room environment? The room, the speakers, the engineer, or the room correction? Charlie?
Oh, don't start with me.
What's the most important? I don't know if there is a most important. How can you have like...
You got to pick one, I'm sorry. I'm going to hold you to this.
I will say the engineer, because then the engineer in that case will know. If it's a good engineer, will know what's the problem. But if you have a great system, right, and great room correction, great everything, great speakers, great room, but the engineer that doesn't have good ears, then everything falls apart, right? So for that reason, I'll say the engineer.
The engineer,
Yeah.
but leaning also in other directions.
No, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna say room correction as well because the way I am at the moment, my how do you call it? My situation is like without room correction, I would be able to do what I do now today. So if I have to pick two, then would be engineer or room correction.
Ooh, okay.
So yeah, that would be my answer.
I'll take any advances on that, Romesh.
I think it's a tough question because I think, as you said, they all play a huge part. I'd probably also say the engineer because if you can't hear that problem, then maybe none of the other things matter.
Right, yeah. Charlie?
I have no bias or influence by anyone else in the room right now.
Come on.
No, but I do agree. It's the engineer because if you know your rig, you could have the worst rig ever, but as long as you knew how it worked and you know how it translated into other systems, that's the only thing that really matters. But obviously there's lots of benefits to how that can actually help you. And obviously room correction is a massive one. And I do feel like speakers, when I started, I was using KRKs and they did a certain job for a while, and then I've moved on to various speakers throughout my career, and I can notice a massive step up every time I've got better speakers. My mixes immediately improve, regardless of room correction. But obviously, room correction is incredibly important.
Okay, that's sort of maybe a neat segue, maybe not. Let's see. Pierre, you've worked in some very complex acoustic spaces with your Atmos work. What's your experience been with speaker calibration? It's been a range, right? Yeah,
so obviously with Atmos, speaker calibration is probably more important than the engineer. Okay, simply because we have, the smallest Atmos system is a 714, so you have 12 speakers. So you just need one out of phase or one that plays in the wrong, or not corrected, and it's going to cause big issues. So in the Atmos world, room correction is quite important because we have, even in stereo, but in Atmos even more, you have time difference. So obviously different speakers coming at you at different times. You got frequency difference, so different kind of speakers, different positions reach your ears in a different place, so different obviously frequency and different volume as well. Because if they're closer to you, if they're further, the volume is going to be different. So correction is probably number one in an Atmos world. So yeah, it's as important as a stereo, but even more when you have more than 1, 2 speakers.
And have you calibrated rooms with SonarWorks before?
Yeah, I've done SonarWorks calibrations, not Atmos in stereo. But I've seen people using for Atmos, and it's when you turn it on and off, it's like night and day. It's not comparable to what happens in the stereo world, simply because of the reasons I just mentioned.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking when you turn it off.
It's like, how can people think about that without doing it? Yeah.
So ORIA Mini here, which is the new product from Audience, it uses DSP hardware to run SonarWorks monitor calibration profiles.
Okay.
You've used ORIA, the bigger brother to ORIA Mini, with a multi-channel SonarWorks implementation. What's your experience been using ORIA with SonarWorks multi-channel? So
basically, it's going to sound funny, but I don't know how to answer because everything has been so seamless without even me thinking about. So I, sometimes I kind of mix TYX studios, so the Atmos room, and they've got an ORIA with SonarWorks system built into it and with the calibration. So literally what I do, I just come plug in a cable and everything is calibrated. I don't have to think about it. So it's difficult to answer your question. I will say amazing because I didn't have to ever solve an issue or had an issue or even think about it. The beauty of just coming into a room, just plugging your computer and start working straight without thinking about this stuff is amazing. So I've good experience.
Excellent. Let's talk about pain points though, because room correction, speaker calibration, these things aren't without their foibles, shall we say. There are certainly pain points. what have you encountered, Pierre? I know you work in Pro Tools, for instance.
Yep.
What are the pain points with using software room correction solutions?
Well, obviously there's different ways you can use, for example, SonarWorks or the softwares where you can use as a standalone software, and from Pro Tools you can set your playback engine to be the room correction software. So it goes from Pro Tools into the software, and then from the software into the speakers. But I was having some issues because then I wouldn't be able to use my interface fully, because if I select SonarWorks as a interface from as the output of Pro Tools, so then I wouldn't be able to use all my settings of the interface, which can be a reamp section, or would be a separate monitor mix or a separate headphones mix. So what you tend to do is just use a plugin on the master chain. But it can be challenging as well, because when I'm switching, I need to bypass it if I'm switching speakers. If I'm using NSTENS, obviously, I've done so many times where I just switch, and then I get NSTENS with the room correction, which is completely wrong, because the room correction was based on the previous speakers. Big issues. Obviously, you need to bypass when you're bouncing. Likely enough, it gives you notifications that, hey, listen, I've seen that notification so many times. And obviously you've got some latency as well, which doesn't matter a lot if you're mixing, but if you're recording or if you're sending, like an audio movie session, like remote session kind of thing, that can cause some issues.
Sounded like you had something to add to that, Charlie.
Well, I was just thinking about like emerging people. You just really don't know what you don't know. And I remember like even before I knew what compression really was, when I first started doing, I used to automate the vocals, literally every single syllable, like up and down, and did manual compression on that. And you find throughout your career, you end up like compensating for things. And I feel like when I then learned about room correction and started actually calibrating my speakers and stuff, I just suddenly learned something like really important. And I think until you come across stuff like this, you just really don't know it exists. But I think it makes like a huge difference when you have access to it. That was kind of my thought.
So Romesh, I know that you have a very high-end, expensive room correction system at Longwave. What's been your experience with other more maybe attainable software solutions?
SonarWorks is something I've been using for a long time as well. The main thing with running it as software is you kind of sometimes have to think about it quite a lot. So for instance, like you said, having to turn it off if you're running a print of a mix. Sometimes you have to make a whole new path just to be able to, to listen to things through it. And, having it now in its own dedicated hardware thing that's the dream. I don't ever want to think about this stuff. I just want it to work. So, I've actually been begging that company to make this for a long time, so I'm glad it exists now. Not that it was me who, but like, I think having the software in its own dedicated hardware thing, like that just takes all the software problems out of it, and you're just you're not thinking about it anymore, and you're just hearing the sound of it.
Are there any other things that the other systems out there are missing right now, like maybe some of the more affordable hardware systems are missing?
Colours. I'm not joking.
Really?
Everything's so like just black or grey. I don't know. Genuinely, I do think this is a thing that a lot of audio companies are missing. But anyway, I know that's not the point. But like, even my studio is like fully grey, and I don't have a choice over that. But I try put colour in it, because it's like you want creativity, and it's art, right? Like engineering is the extension and harnessing of ideas. And I just feel like it's such a shame that we spend so much time just making black boxes all the time when they could be other things. Wow, didn't know I was so heated about that. Yeah.
I mean, you've dealt with hardware systems though before, hardware room correction. What were the pain points for you with those?
Again, like I think because also obviously I like clearly have ADHD as well. I think like being able to like have an idea and immediately do something about it is really important. And I find like sometimes when I'm having to like remember to turn systems on or off, or remembering having to like turn on physical hardware or on or off or whatever, it can become really tiring. And honestly, like latency is the killer of all ideas. So like I feel like having stuff that is seamless and like straightforward, no latency or very low latency is incredibly important for like the creative process, especially because so many artists are producers these days, and the variety between everyone is like getting a lot smaller. Like people are expected to be able to mix, and they can produce, and they can write songs and everything like this. And so when we have hardware that like seamlessly means that we can do that, I think it's always an advantage.
I think as well, like especially in tracking, like I have this kind of high-end correction system, and that does not work in a tracking environment where now something like this will, because the latency is, you can barely hear it. So like, I think when you're recording, like you said, like latency is the killer, and you don't, no one wants to hear that stuff.
So talk us through that process then. What happens when you're in the room and you're having to switch between these things? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I have two different rooms, and my mix room is pretty much dedicated to just mixing. So latency to me doesn't really matter in that room, but for tracking, obviously latency is just a huge thing, and so like having something like this just solves that problem, because you just won't really hear the latency at that kind of level. So
there's no need to turn anything off to...
No, and that's what you want, really. I mean, I actually want to forget about, things that, I don't want to be thinking about it. And, that I think that's the key here, is like being able to move it from a software-based thing to it running on its own hardware means that I can have that plugged in, and that's the last time I think about it.
I mean, that's the dream, right?
Yeah.
That's the point of it.
Yeah.
So... the ORIA Mini, Charlie, do you want to pick it up and have a little look-see?
I've been wanting to the whole time. And I'm like, am I allowed to touch it?
Yeah, okay.
Good grip on the bottom of the first side. Yeah.
Stays on your desk.
Oh, sick. Yeah, it's very just like streamlined. I do think it looks really nice, by the way.
Even though it's black.
Even though it's black. Yeah.
So you've got...
it's just very straightforward.
Very straightforward. A dedicated set and forget hardware sits between any audio interface and speakers, running SonarWorks profiles to calibrate your speakers in the room. It works with stereo systems and has a dedicated sub out you might see on the back.
Yeah, I did actually.
Yeah.
I was staring at the back of it for the whole of this.
And then it operates with near zero latency. And there's one other thing. Go on.
I was going to say, do you have 4 different profiles then? Oh,
yeah.
Beautiful.
So how do you imagine using the 4 different profiles?
Oh, definitely between obviously I have the genre thing. Yeah. So then if I'm doing mix mode, I'll be like mixing between like drum and bass and folk music, I guess. But then on the other side of it is, tracking sessions versus mixing sessions. I'll want to do a favorable preset that just makes a track ultimately just sound a little bit better whilst I'm tracking it, and then I'll go like, okay, what are we actually working with?
Yeah, it actually can be useful to have, for example, feels good.
The talking box.
I don't know what you can do with it, having different profiles, so different like EQ curves kind of thing.
Yes, so you can simulate other setups, or...
For example, like I've been into rooms where the listening position, like where the engineer's sitting, is obviously the best spot, but then on the sofa is the worst spot. So maybe have one where it's good for the sofas rather than for the mixing engineer. I think that can be useful, right?
Yeah. Well, even
like your studio.
Literally. Because so in my studio, it's actually acoustically treated as if you would be in like a standard, like say this was the room, like the desk could be here and the artist just sits behind you. But again, I do so much writing in production. I actually have moved my system over so it's more like to the side, and then I have a sofa next to me. But I actually find that I end up twisting my right speaker so that it's facing at the person on the sofa a bit more, which is like obviously like that's not an accurate mix thing, but means they're not missing all the top end because they're sat slightly off to the side of it, so they get like a much more like inclusive feeling. So it'd be really cool to have a system there. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's on like we're on like creative mode, like, and the speakers are set up for an immersive and semi-accurate experience.
Nice, immersive and semi-accurate.
That's me.
Romesh, what do you take away from this?
Yeah, it looks great. I love the profiles thing because, I think as as the others touched upon, like, you know, having, you know, a slightly different profile for tracking. Like, the one cool thing with Sonarworks is you can actually bend the EQ a little bit to taste. So, you know, maybe having one which has got a bit more bottom end for, you know, like hearing it and tracking, you know, a bit more of a fun kind of sound. And then switching to something that's like more flatter for mixing. I think that's really cool.
Do you want to have a little look at the back of it? Is there anything else on the back of that jumps out to you? I know you have been, you've seen this before, haven't you?
I have, yeah. Well, I kind of helped a little bit in the early stages of this, and the one great thing it does also have is a digital in, because then that kind of means that if you want to avoid another conversion, then, you know, I think that's a great feature to have on there.
In what respect? How does that help people not having that extra layer of conversion?
Well, just, you know, you'll be able to, you know, your music's not then going out to be converted again. So you can just go digital out of an interface straight into this, and there's no extra conversion to happen then.
So then you save a little bit of latency, or it's just that you don't have to degrade your signal at all? You're
just not degrading, you know, you're not having to degrade your signal. I mean, you know, I don't think this is going to degrade your signal anyway if you're using the AD side, but I think
affect it somehow.
I think a lot of people will be, you know, happy that is there.
I'm not suggesting for a moment that ORIA or any audience stuff would degrade anybody's signal. It's all very high quality stuff. But to not have that extra layer of conversion is a benefit. Yeah,
and I think also, you know, maybe you're using, you know, all the outs on your converter anyway, so just being able to come out of the optical out, and, you know, it's just.
I mean, are you running different systems, like a hi-fi system and an audio interface in any of your studios, or is it just
just speakers, or two sets of speakers? Yeah, I'm not running like a different system. Although we glossed over the AirPod thing, but like AirPods are a massive mixed reference for me, because practically every single person that I do their tracks for, they are listening to them on AirPods. So and also for like Atmos mix stuff as well. Like that's the main way people like can listen to it. So yeah. But anyway, that's kind of by the by. But yeah, I don't have like a hi-fi system.
So can you actually like switch between the digital input and I'm guessing you must be able to, right?
Yes, you can in the software. And you can also remote control a lot of the functionality from an iPad or from a Stream Deck as well. There's a little app that means that you can switch profiles and turn your sub on and off if you so wish. And that sort of thing. So yeah, cool. It's all doable. The sub out then, Pierpaolo, must be...
I think it's quite useful, yes. Not for my setup, because the way my setup works is just go left and right into the sub, and then left and right. You know, there's a crossover in the sub, and then which goes to the speakers. So I wouldn't be using the sub out, but I know a lot of systems that would use it.
Such as? What kind of systems are you thinking of?
Well, system like subs that don't have a crossover, that take a dedicated input, right? So those kind of inputs, similar setup to what I have, but using a different sub than the one I have.
Right.
So basically, certain subs would work with this, certain subs will not work, will not benefit, let's say.
What does the sub out mean for you in your process?
Well, I'm a huge fan of using subwoofers, so I think it's great to have that on there. I also think some people use a cheaper sub, which may not have the best kind of ins and outs on it. So at least being able to have a sub out means that you haven't got to send your entire audio signal into there and then out into your speakers. You can actually have their own dedicated path. So I think that is actually a really good feature.
And I know that you have neighbours as well, Charlie. So useful in that respect?
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting one in the sense of when you're in a complex, although where I'm based, it is, you know, sound isolated and everything. But the reality is when I'm pumping hard drum and bass, like you don't necessarily want a sub going into your neighbour's room unnecessarily. Obviously, if you're mixing, you know, you're going to need to have it on. But if I'm just having a good old time in there, it's really useful to be able to have the option to be able to turn the subs on and off for, if one of my neighbours is, you know, tracking vocals or something like that, or I need them to turn their sub off because I'm tracking vocals or something like that. So I think having on a practical and communal level, I think there's an advantage to that.
I think it's also quite useful, like when you're kind of doing your calibration in the room and you want to maybe play with different crossover points of that sub, then that's also really useful to, you know, because that's something I went through. I spent a long time playing around with that, to get the right kind of sound for my room.
So for people who don't really understand the relationship between the crossover and how that impacts your speaker calibration, can you talk us through that a little bit?
When I was finishing treating my room, there was a bit of a null at one of the frequency points, and adjusting that sub crossover helped me fill that in a little bit. And so I think there's definitely some ways you can use that crossover to help with your room.
And in terms of the profiles as well, are there certain tests that you could avoid doing, do you think, if you were using a profile rather than necessarily jumping in the car?
Well, similar things that I mentioned before. So let's say you don't have a pair of stands. Maybe you can focus, you can have a curve that's only mid-range, so people will take out the equation low end and high end. So I guess that would be useful. Obviously, having bought the stands, I'm going to use them. But I could use, like, for example, if there's a profile for like a car, where there's usually cars, they have like low mids enhancement or things like that, where it can be useful. So maybe something like that. Or I've seen on Sonarworks profile, one day I was scrolling through it, there was like TV, there's like phone out, there's so many things that the more you have, obviously the better it is for you to understand how it translates across different devices. So obviously having the device itself, the extra device, it's more useful. But if you don't have that, then that would be a great alternative. So yeah, anything you can think of. There's not a specific profile that will say, oh, that's the best.
No, of course.
The more, the better kind of thing in that sense for people, just starting out with this kind of stuff. So.
I also think, obviously, the profile thing is cool if you're traveling to different studios. So, like, I spend a lot of time going to a lot of different studios that I don't know. So just taking something like this with me is great, because I can just do a quick calibration of that room, and then I at least get something that may be a little bit more familiar to, what I'm used to hearing. So if you are someone who does go between a lot of different studios, and having that profile thing set up for those different rooms, I think that's great.
Yeah, that's really smart. And I also love the example you gave earlier of having a different listening position as well, to be able to give the artist what you're listening to at that moment as well.
Yeah. Great
use cases there, really interesting. So who do you think this product is going to be most helpful?
Everyone. I genuinely think like everyone should have, some kind of, if your room is not ideal, which, a lot of people, especially these days, I think, music creation and mixing is now so accessible. People are doing it all over the place. But I think it's so important that you really need to hear what is actually happening. So, for me, I think if you're not in a well acoustically treated room, then yeah, I think everyone should be using it, really.
I have got the software version, obviously, but having the hardware is gonna save me for so many things, because switching to headphones, switching to different systems, this can be only applied to the main the stereo speakers that I use, right? So if I'm switching, it's not going to use Sonarworks, it's not going to use anything. So if I'm switching to an stance, for example, I don't have to bypass the software, because this will take care only of my mains. So in that case, and the latency, and bypassing when you're bouncing, and CPU and all this kind of thing is going to be out of the equation. So definitely useful to a lot of people, mainly obviously bedroom producers, because they need room correction 100%. Yeah, more than people that have a studio. So
I think even if you are like really happy with how your room sounds, I think you will find by adding something like this in, it will at least give you that extra, sometimes that extra little bit, which can make a huge difference.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, I think another subsect of things here. So obviously, we all make tracks with the intention of them coming out, and that's what we want. We want them to be mixed. But the reality is, the music industry runs on a lot of demos that never really got out, and a lot of emerging producers working with developing artists and stuff. I really feel like it's really beneficial for even emerging producers, because when the A&Rs and the management are listening to, like, can I hear your demos? They genuinely are expecting like releasable quality level. And I think that even if the track never gets released, or even if you're not even officially a mix engineer, having something that is going to help you at any stage just to make your mixes sound more professional is going to help your career and help the artists that you work with. So I think it can be, it's an advantage in all sort of steps.
I think that's a really good point, actually. There's so many demos which that ends up being the released version. So,
Yeah.
You know, I think now more than ever, it's so important to just get every step of the way, whether it's a demo, like that's got to sound good as well, I think.
What slogan would you pitch for ORIA Mini and say it down that camera?
Buy this and never have to do a car test ever again.
That's nice. I like that.
Yeah.
That's bravo. Pass it down the line, Pierre.
Oh God.
I think you're done this one as well.
If you think about room correction, this will save you a lot of headache.
I'm super excited to try out the ORIA Mini, because I think this is going to save me a lot of time in the production suite versus mixing suite.
Seriously, thank you so much for making time for this. It's been really interesting talking to you about room correction, speaker calibration, and everything in between. Thanks for sharing your horror stories, particularly. Those are we've all got them. So that's all we have time for. But thanks again to our expert panel, Romesh, Charlie, Pierpaolo. You can find out more about the Audient ORIA Mini at audient.com. Thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.